Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ryan Ride Mechanic channel. How the heck are you doing today? Alright, so this one's been a long one coming. A lot of people have asked me to do this one, and I said, yes, I'm going to. Well, it's finally here. Today is the day. Today, we are going to talk about how a B&m Dive coaster works. I am excited. I know you are excited about it. So, clear one, clear two. Let's get into this video.
Now get ready. Here we go.
Alright, so if this is your first time here, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share, do all that stuff downstairs. It does help out the algorithm, which helps my channel out, and I do appreciate that because I'd like to grow this channel. Number one comment from everyone that I seem to get is like, how do you not have more people following your channel? I know. I get a lot of mixed answers on that one, but the main thing is to share it out there. A lot of the stuff I don't have control over. Some of the stuff I do have a little bit of control over, but not much. But that's a whole different topic for a different time. Maybe a live video or something like that. We'll have to see how that one. Okay, so today's topic, a B&m Dive coaster. Now, B&m Dive coasters, I don't want to dive into too much regarding the rest of the roller coaster because the rest of the roller coaster is essentially just that. It's a roller coaster. But what makes a B&m Dive coaster is that one particular element at the very top of the lift hill which allows the coaster to experience a free fall or a drop over the outside edge. It's one thing that was very unique and it was way ahead of its time. The first one that came out was all the way back in 1998. Oblivion was the first one that came out. It was really cool. I mean, the thought of looking at that big coaster just dropping into the hole in the ground. Great job on their part. That was pretty friggin' amazing. So let's talk about some of the things that make a dive coaster a dive coaster. The first one is what is the track and structure? What's different about that from B&m's normal track and structure? Well, the coaster itself, the coach itself, is much wider. It's much further apart. So what did B&m do? They upscaled their track and structure. So a normal B&m rail to rail outside or center line to center line of the rails, I believe, is right at 1200 millimeters. So these are going to sit much further out. I don't know what the exact dimension is on them, but man, they look like they're closer to 2000 millimeters. They look really big. So the rails outside to outside is much bigger. The coaches hold average of 8 people across, and they're only 3 coaches deep. So that's one of the things that allows the dive function to work so well is how many coaches it has. Since there's only 3 rows, everyone gets that exact same drop and that same inertia pickup, as opposed to a much longer train. You get that snake effect where you go over in the front and it would drop and you just continue to hang there, and then the back would start speeding up going forward to where the people in the front are already going straight down the track, and the people in the back will get whipped over the edge so hard it would probably break their neck as they go over. So they wanted to keep that coach small, but everything else had to get upsized as well. So they had to upsize the anti-rollback. So instead of one anti-rollback going up the lift hill next to the chain like is typical on a B&m, well, there's more componentry underneath there, so they actually had to put the anti-rollback rail further away from the chain where it would normally be. So I believe they were worried about a cantilever effect when the anti-rollbacks catch and the vehicle stops. I believe they worried about the whole vehicle pitching to one side as it was sitting there. So all your pressure would be on the anti-rollback and then basically on the left rear guide wheel, essentially. And the whole coach is kind of cocked like that. So for these coaches, they upscaled the anti-rollbacks. They put 2 anti-rollbacks. Well, everything got bigger. The anti-rollbacks got bigger. The size of the chain dog got bigger. Everything just got bigger and bigger.
He would have an enormous Schwanzstücke.
That goes without saying.
Oof.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay, so then let's talk about, normally underneath the coach, you'd have a total on a B&m train, you'd have 4 anti-rollbacks, 1, 2, 3, 4, kind of evenly spaced throughout there, and you have 2 chain dogs, one towards the front and one towards the middle of the train. Well, in this particular case, they still have 2 chain dogs, one towards the front, one towards the rear, and they actually have, each coach has 4 anti-rollbacks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 anti-rollbacks. Now, I don't know specifically if they're all for the exact same dimension apart. I kind of believe they are, so when they stop, they would literally bite into 4 places. If you made them at an oddball dimension apart from each other, i.e., if the tooth rail going up the lift hill, let's say every time the tooth drops down into the next one, let's say that dimension is 300 millimeters difference from each tooth to tooth. Well, you would make the anti-rollback space so when they're down all the way, they would be 300 millimeters between them. That way, when the train stops, you would get both bite into the rail at the same time. Now, if you increase the length of the rail and say we went from 300 millimeters to 600 millimeters, you could space that further out, but now what I would do is the first anti-rollback, instead of putting it 300 millimeters away from the top, I would put that back at about 450. That way, when the train stops, depending on which anti-rollback it's closest to, either the rear set of anti-rollbacks would bite into it or the front set, but I don't believe that's the case on these. I believe all 4 per coach bite in at the exact same time. Then you have 2 chain dogs underneath there, and then you have now underneath, right next to those chain dogs, almost in line with it, just slightly over to the side, you now have this one extra feature that now makes this whole thing work, and this is called your drop dog. The drop dog is essentially a chain dog, but it's facing the opposite way. Normally, if direction of travel is this way, my chain dog would face this way and drop into it. Hold on. I've got a prop for this. I just remembered that. All right, so this is my wooden chain dog out of... this is more geared towards the floorless coaster, but they're basically kind of the same thing. If direction of motion is this way, your chain dog is going to be facing this way, because as the chain goes to pick up, this dog has to go over those links. It will fall into it, and the chain will pick up right there and continue to push the train up the lift hill like it's supposed to. All right, so those coaches have 2 chain dogs that drop in just like normal. This is exactly like a normal roller coaster so far. No big deal. Now, at the very front, they have this drop dog, which is essentially your chain dog, just like this. It's shaped a little differently on the end. I have a picture of it. But it's essentially your chain dog, but it's turned around this way now. So now your chain dog is sitting here, and it's facing the direction of travel. If your train is going this way, it's facing forward. Well, you can't have that the first part of the ride, because as the train would feed up onto the lift hill, normally what happens is the booster wheels at the base of the lift hill feed a vehicle up just a hair faster than the actual chain is going. That allows the chain dog to actually go over links and gently fall into place, and then as the weight picks up the lift hill, the booster motors can't efficiently push it, so the vehicle starts to slow down. So you get this nice little, the chain dog will come up and over the link, fall down, and then gently just push back into it, minimizes the impact on the chain. That's really nice to have. B&m chains are typically in really good condition for a really long time because of the way it feeds the train onto the lift hill, instead of like a lot of like on old-fashioned aero coaster and things like that, where they would essentially have to make the lift. Well, RMCs still do this as well. They don't get fed into the lift, they have to make the lift, and you get that thing where the chain dog might go up and then forward and then bam, and land right back onto that link. It's exaggerated. There's typically only about 6 inches, 5.5, 6 inches between a link, but in this much space, as that passes over the one link and gets up to the second one, you now have this much acceleration space for that vehicle to essentially stops and then starts to fall backwards before it lands on that other chain. The absolute pinnacle of that is going to be a boomerang, where it's doing that at a 45-degree angle. Or 55-degree angle, to where it really slams into that link hard, and you can hear it across the park when the boomerang lands on lift 2. It makes a loud noise. So for the first part of this, in order to get the train onto the lift hill, we have to keep the launch dog in the up position and locked in there. So there's a special device inside there that basically works when the launch dog comes up. It's a little tiny cam that basically goes underneath the lip and holds it. In this case, keep saying launch dog. Why do I keep saying that? The drop dog. So the drop dog is held up into the chassis just with a little tiny cam, kind of shaped like an L. I've got video of this that was actually sent in by an Instagram coaster patch shirt guy. He went on a tour and they had everything laying out, both the drop dog, they had the unlock cam, and then he was actually able to go film it himself, and he was able to push the device up and show it to lock and unlock. One of the reasons why I'm not too worried about showing you right here, because the video speaks mountains for it. Like, as soon as you watch the video, it's crystal clear. It's like, oh, that's how it does it. It holds the drop dog up into place until it gets to the very top of the lift hill. Now, at the very top of the lift hill, the coaster rolls forward. The majority of these coasters go around typically a 90 or a U-shaped bend, although it depends on the track layout. Wrath of Rakshasa, whatever it's called, installed right now, goes out and basically does like a 30 or 40 degree bend in its track. There's even a couple of them, like Iron Menace was the most recent one that was installed, where it doesn't actually have a bend. It's the same chain as it goes up and over the front. Doable. It's completely doable. It just doesn't have that extra little element where you get maybe like that little free. I think that element on top where it's making that U-turn-ish, where it's going to the next, that drop section, I honestly think that is one of those things that heightens the fear factor of this particular thing, because you're up there and it gets that slow moving, like, okay, here comes the edge, here it comes, as opposed to Iron Menace. It's like you get up, and as soon as you get up to the top, as soon as you're up there, you almost start the drop sequence, so your brain doesn't have a lot of time to react to where you are and what you're doing. Perceived danger on these rides is one of the biggest things thrill seekers go for. So you want that perceived danger out there. So you want to give people time to perceive the danger. For some people, just going up the lift hill isn't enough. It's that little bit of weight at the top that makes it that much scarier. It's kind of one of those things on drop towers as well. They get up there, the longer they hold you at the top to a point, it makes it a little scarier up there. So it may hold you for an extra 5-10 seconds up there before it releases. All right, so once you get up to the top of the lift hill, you start typically free rolling. And now the lift hill is one block zone. Now the way the blocks are laid out on these rides are kind of different depending on which type of ride it is, because like Iron Menace, its block zones are laid out a little differently. Like a traditional roller coaster, you go up to the top of the lift. Once you crest the top of the lift into the top track, you're now into the next block. Understandable. That's like any roller coaster, right? If you want to know what a block is, there's an El Toro Ryan video I could probably link to tell you what it is, but it basically prevents trains from bumping into each other, right? Okay, so once you get up to the top on a normal dive coaster where it's got, I'm going to say, a U-shaped element up there, when you crown the top of the lift hill, you have now crossed over into the next block. But as you go around that U-turn, there is typically a set or two of brakes up there. The brake can actually stop the coach and prevent it from going forward into the drop segment. So that brake actually creates another block zone up there. So now, as soon as that train on the traditional U-shaped dive coasters where they're U-shaped on top, as soon as it crowns the lift hill and goes over into the flat section of the track, you could theoretically dispatch another train right there and have it start going up. Now, that other coach, it will proceed forward until it runs into that brake that's there. On a lot of them, that last brake before the dive section, you will see a green, green doesn't have to be green. You will see a lobe sticking up in the middle of the track. The lobe in the middle of that brake, the lobe is actually what does the unlocking of that drop dog. So this whole time, that drop dog has been held up in place by its little cam that's sitting there like this. And when that cam goes over that lobe, it will push the cam up and allow the drop dog to fall down. So if I demonstrate, if I go here, and then as the lobe passes underneath, my little cam lifts up, the drop dog comes down. And now the drop dog is ready to receive the drop chain. I'm not going to get very inventive with the words here. I mean, it's typically just a dive chain or a drop chain or something like. I don't even know if B&M specifies a difference on those things. Most manufacturers just point to it and say chain, not very inventive. The invention comes up to the park. They want to determine how scary they want it to be, so they call it different things. All right, so one thing that brake also does, and it's typically reinforced with a set of booster wheels right in front of it too, drive the train forward. What those booster wheels are doing right around that segment is they're actually matching the speed of the train to that drop chain, or that final chain that goes over the edge, just like they do on the lift base. They speed the train up and try to match the speed so it's easy on the equipment. It's the same thing. With this guy going forward, about to run into the chain, they don't want that to happen fast. They want it to be a nice, smooth engagement as it goes along. They don't want people going, hey, here comes that chain. Oh, ow, my neck. There it is. Geez, what the hell was that? They don't want that to happen, so they want that engagement really smooth as it comes up to that point. Then from there, you're into the actual drop of the ride. So we've crossed that last break, so we're now into the free run track. Even though there's a chain in front right there, that chain assembly is generally not considered a block device because it officially can't hold the train in that spot. So the brake is a block device. The chain is typically not. It's going to be just an element in the free run track. So once you pass that break, you're now into the drop section. Another thing, say, well, yeah, it could be a drop device because if, we've seen the train get stuck there. It's happened. We've seen a train get stuck there, and where they had to do this big old long process to get people unstuck from that area. That is correct, but the manufacturer did not intend for those guests to be unloaded in that area. They didn't intend for that at all. So there's no platforms to get guests off there. There is a stairway that goes down to the motor, but it's not intended to get people off at that point. So that is not a block area. That is actually just part of an element. That's all it is. So now up there underneath the track. So what you have in this drop chain area, it is essentially a miniature lift hill. That's all it is. It's essentially a miniature lift hill. The big lift hill you just got up there with, it is that reconfigured into a small, nice little neat package. So you have the chain that goes over the top. You have a motor and gearbox combination underneath. And then you have a bull wheel and a tail wheel. So the bull wheel is going to be where the motor is. And then you have an idler sprocket up top and the tail, which is actually in the track up ahead. So you've got all that assembly sitting there. And then the train hooks onto it and starts to go forward. Now there's proximity sensors on the track. There's multiple places to put these. There's nothing written in stone about where they have to go. You can count almost anything. But typically what B&M has been doing for a lot of them is that on the front, if you're in their POV, on the front right-hand side, that rail typically has 3 to 4 to 5 sensors sitting out there watching the train as it comes by. So what is it doing? The lift motor is running at that idle speed or like mid-speed, which is what the train is rolling forward at. Once it gets to those sensors, it hits that first sensor and it slows the vehicle way down and it puts it into a crawl and it slows the train all the way down, down, down. This is where everyone says, okay, and then it stops and it holds you there. Well, here's the reason I'm making the video actually, because it doesn't. I'm friends with LT Coasters on YouTube. Go check out her channel if you got the chance. She's very nerdy. She's just like I am. We get along great together. She's very nerdy and she loves to figure out the finite stuff. She loves to hang out when maintenance guys are there. She'll ask questions. She'll do all sorts of stuff. It is awesome. She gets so much cool information. Very helpful. And she just started her YouTube channel up, so go check out LT Coasters. But anyway, she was out there investigating this because her and I were talking back and forth. And I said, oh yeah, that's some really interesting stuff. And I was sitting there going, I wonder what size brake they're using on that motor. If it's got to be a big pneumatic brake holding the thing, because that's got to hold a lot of weight out there over the edge just like that. She actually cracked the code for me, so I didn't have to do anything for this. So I credit this whole thing to LT Coasters. Go check out her channel. So what she found out, because she was at Iron Menace, and she was watching at the return, because Iron Menaces is all one thing. You can see the chain from the very bottom of the ride. It's doing the same exact thing up on top. And she was watching an inspection window with the chain going by. You could see it flinging by inside there really fast. And then when the vehicle got up and it got to its dive position, you saw that whole thing slow down, 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 and then it suddenly sped up again. That's when she made the realization that the pause at the top is not actually a pause. It's actually just an extreme slow crawl speed done by the motor. And then I was like, what? Maybe it's just that one ride. So I started tearing through dive videos, and the best ones you could find are the ones they're typically done by the park themselves, where they stick a camera right to the nose of the vehicle and hard mount it. And that's key for this, because when somebody's holding the camera or they've got it, mounted on a body cam or whatever, their body shifts while they're going over that segment. So the camera footage is really hard to determine what's going on. And most people from the bottom don't zoom way into the coach to really watch it carefully and see what it's doing. But sometimes you can find it on other POV videos. But every video from typically the park where they mount it solid on the ride vehicle, every single one of them, it comes up to there, it goes out, it's going at, let's say, 4 feet per second. And then the train matches speed to 4 feet per second. As it goes over, it slows down to 3, 2, 1, and then it slows down to like 1 inch per second, and that's about it. And once it gets down to about that 1 inch per second, it holds it there for just a minute sliver of time, maybe about 1 second, and then the motor speeds back up. So what happens is that as it's going over the edge, it slows down, down, down. Once it gets that feed where it's at that absolute crawl, so the motor is sitting there at minimum speed and probably maximum torque, and that motor is really humming to hold it there, that drop dog that's inside of there, the lip is not as pronounced as this one. So that drop dog that's sitting in that chain is right next to that. It's going to be the return sprocket on this side, or the tail sprocket. And it's right there. And then what happens is, as it approaches this point, it's literally about this speed. As it approaches that point, that sprocket actually pushes the drop dog out. As it tries to go over the sprocket, it'll actually push that drop dog out of there and shove the dog out. And then once it shoves the dog off of that link, the coaster free falls down forward. Now, I tried looking, and now the part where it's about it, the sprocket actually pushes the dog out of there, I might be wrong about that. Total transparency, I could be wrong about that. I've looked at lots of pictures where they had the whole assembly sitting on the ground, and what I was looking for was in the chain trough itself, where the chain is going down that curve. I was looking for it to come down to that curve and then suddenly make a very hard bend backwards towards that sprocket, showing that it's not the sprocket that's going to push that dog out of there. It's simply just the chain pulling away from the dog, and the two disconnect. So, but that's not the case. It actually goes in the same curvature, the same arc the entire time right to that sprocket, and they meet up perfectly. So it's like, okay, that means it's the sprocket that's taking the dog out of the chain, which makes sense because you can put the proximity sensors along there to say that once you've reached that point where the chain dog opens up like that and gets pushed out, like 2 inches or an inch before that, you can tell the motor to go back into its service speed. So it goes down. Here comes your train, right? It's coming down. It's going down forward, slow, 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 slow. And then it hangs out right there, and then it suddenly reaches this point, and right where this assembly gets close, it suddenly speeds back up. And right as it speeds back up, that sprocket pushes the dog out of the chain, and the whole assembly works together very smooth, flawlessly, and the train's allowed to go on its merry way. During the commissioning process, when you're running along up there, I know the stock video from Iron Menace, they had that thing just keep going over at about its jog speed the entire time, where it would just go over and then release on the way down. So they know exactly, roughly, they know where that dog is going to release. So that allows them to get the proximity sensor mounts really close to that area. But it's going to be up to the people installing it to say, okay, we have this ramp down, it takes this amount of time, so that last little finite to make that sequence work perfectly and smooth is going to be manual adjustments of those proximity sensors. Okay, so we've gotten it down here, and then it goes down, 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 and it holds itself there, and then it kind of speeds back up again, and then releases. It's like, that's dumb. We don't want to do that. Okay, so take that last proximity sensor and move it towards that head sprocket about 2 inches. So now it slows down, 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 holds, and it holds forever now. It's holding forever, and the motor's getting too hot, and it's about to go over current. And they're like, okay, we can't do that for that long. So take the first proximity sensor, first 1 or 2 proximity sensors, and move them further down the rail as well too. It's like, okay. And then we maybe give it a different ramp to where maybe the first proximity sensor stays in place. And then after all those sensors are adjusted and the finite back and forth is done and the ramp is set the way the manufacturer wants the ramp to be set, the ramp being the motor, how it decelerates coming down there, then you can get that nice smooth process where it's going forward, 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 and then slows down, pauses just for a second, and then the dog falls out and the coach goes forward. Really simple. The track also has, a lot of times they'll put a second dive element in. This is actually just done by brakes. It'll go through a block zone, and then the brakes will slow the coach all the way back down pretty much to a crawl and then release it. That is only done by the brakes. That's the deceleration hysteresis. If I'm saying that, I'm probably not saying it right. That's the hysteresis inside the program that says, hey, that train is moving, it's coming in at 17 miles per hour. Slow it down and then start to pulse the brakes. As it slows down, start to pulse the brakes, and when it gets to this area, I want it moving at 1 mile per hour. That's why that second drop on most of those block areas is a much wider arc than it was before, because now the train's carrying a little bit of a speed, and again, you can't pull that back row that fast over the thing because you might start hurting people or it might start tearing up your equipment, so they don't want to do that. Now, once all that's said and done, now, during this time, if you have negative G-force or anything else like that, this lock dog can easily go back up into place and just go and lock into place again. No problem. It can easily do that out on the track. I'm going to look for a video of it because no one ever records the train coming back into the station in the front row POVs. Most of the time when you hit the brake run, all the POV videos in, they're like, we're done. But the easiest thing to do would simply be to run the dog over another cam. Kind of like the first cam was used to unlock the dog. The first cam was riding on this unlock lever. So it makes sense to run the dog over another cam, so as it came up into probably the transfer area for the first time, it would simply just push this up and lock it back into place. During video editing, it actually made more sense that the sprocket that unlinked the two is probably also the thing that's linking the dog up in the same position. So it's probably the sprocket that's pushing the dog back up and allowing it to stick up there for the rest of the ride. And it would go forward. So, okay. And I would imagine on some B&m coasters, probably not all of them, they probably put another proximity sensor in there just to make sure that that dog is not down as the train goes forward into the lift hill. So there's a little bit of safekeeping. Because again, it's more just wear and tear. If you run that dog straight up into that chain and let it just go in there, it's going to impact, it's going to hit. it could cause over amperage on the motor. Let's talk about the motor real quick. So downstairs you have this big motor with a big gearbox that's turning that chain, that's allowing the whole lift hill to go as you're going up to the top of the ride. At the very top of the ride, you can actually get away with a smaller motor with a bigger gearbox. That way the motor has to do less work as it's holding the train out over that area. Instead of being, let's just say, a 300-to-1 ratio like it is downstairs, it might be a 400-to-1 ratio up on the top. So you can use maybe the same motor a little bit smaller, and everything works just fine. Its serviceability is nice and long. It's got a long, healthy life to that motor because it's not struggling to hold that train up there. Now, with Iron Menace, where they're using the lifting motor as the drop motor as well, Iron Menace might have a little bit, it might be a little 50-50 on both sides. It might be a much, much stronger motor downstairs. That way it can easily lift that train up to the top better than most other dive coasters probably. And then once it slows down to do that maximum current hold at the end, or crawl, I should say, at the end, it's probably still working within its easy little safe range. So the videos are all courtesy of LT Coasters on that one, where she recorded the chain slow down and then speed back up at the base of the lift hill. That one's really incredible to watch, and that really highlights what's going on. And then the pictures that I've been using are from Coaster Patch Shirt Guy on Instagram, and that video that he made. I mean, if you had any doubt about how that dog is held up there and unlocks, I mean, he got the perfect, like if I was standing there and I wanted to show you guys how this happened, I would have recorded that exact same video. So thank you very much to Coaster Patch Shirt Guy for giving me that video so I could show everybody else. Okay, so I think that's going to do it for this video. Really cool. It's a really cool subject. Those dive coasters are definitely becoming like the next boomerang. I think everyone's going to have one soon and thereafter. They're just going to keep multiplying and going out there. There's already 17 installed. Well, I mean 18 now if you count the Rakshasa, Ricochet, I don't know. If you count that ride too. That's like 18 coasters, 18 dive coasters now installed out there. And I honestly haven't ridden on one yet, but I think Great America is going to be my closest one. So maybe I'll get to ride on the newest one this year. I would really love for that to happen. That's like my summer to-do list. That'd be pretty cool. Get on that one and to get on the tilt coaster out there at Cedar Point, not to mention Top Thrill 2 when it reopens. That would be pretty awesome too. I'd really love to do like a coaster tour this year. There's so many places that I haven't visited yet that I really want to go, and that's everything. I just don't have the money. Money would be awesome, right? The world revolves around money. That would be cool. But most of us have to plan these things really far in advance, and trips aren't cheap for sure. If you want to contact me, you can leave a comment down below in the video. That does help out the algorithm. It shows people are interacting with the video, which is great. And if you want to email me, you can always email me at ryantheridemechanic@yahoo.com. That's going to do it. Stay off the air gates. Bye.